Hi, welcome today to Anna Plus News. I'm Gina Brown and I'm joined here today by my guest of honor, Dr. Survé. Thank you for joining us. So we really wanted to come in today and ask you a segment on South African politics and the changes in South African politics for Anna News. So you've just come back from the World Media Summit as a keynote speaker. I'm sure world leaders value your opinion and must have been asking you about South Africa. So while you've been gone, you must have known that a lot of changes have happened in the South African political arena. What is your opinion on those?
Well, Gina, thank you for having me on your show today. You're right, because South Africa is part of BRICS, it's very topical in China, and at the World Media Summit, there were many questions about South Africa overall. And I guess what you're referring to is some of the political changes. And everybody wants to know, first of all, is there going to be a change of the governing party in the next election in 2024? And does the ANC, have the support to continue to be the majority party? I guess that's top of people's minds because the ANC is a liberation movement. It's been around for a long time, and people are surprised that it may not be the governing party next year. So yes, one had to deal with all of those questions. Obviously, when I got back to South Africa, there were, I think, two sort of announcements, if you like. The one was
the former ANC veteran, Mavuso Msmiyang. He left the ANC, and now Mr. Roger Jardine.
Oh, yes. So, Mavuso Msmiyang is a veteran of the ANC. He was highly critical of Zuma and many would say part of the Ramaphosa faction that got Ramaphosa elected. He has resigned from the ANC. Let me be specific and say the ANC of Ramaphosa. And I think when we talk about the ANC, we must accept that there are two ANCs. There's the ANC of Ramaphosa, which is completely corrupt and incompetent, and there's the ANC before Ramaphosa. There still remains very many good people in the ANC today. But Ramaphosa, if you look at the Pala scandal, the CR17 campaign, the COVID PPE corruption, if you look at the complete destruction of the company's infrastructure in rail, in Eskom, it has been a disaster. Ramaphosa, quite frankly, is the worst president ever in the history of the ANC. And some would argue the worst president in the history of South Africa. So I think people are rightfully saying that there could well be a change, because if a veteran like Msmiyang leaves, who was an ardent Ramaphosa supporter, and he's an insider, so to speak, it could open the floodgates to people saying enough is enough. We can no longer be part of this organization that delivered people like the likes of Mandela, Governor Becky, Ruth First, Helen Josephs, many other great struggle veterans who gave their lives to the struggle. So it is a pivotal moment in the history of the ANC and in the history of South Africa. And of course, to compound it all, in the very same week, I saw that the sheriff came to attach the ANC's assets at Lutuli House, which coincidentally is opposite one of our buildings, the Star Building in the center of Johannesburg. Now, how embarrassing for a liberation movement of more than 100 years, established in 1912, to have their assets seized by the sheriff of the court because they were unable to pay their bills. So that is really the perilous state of the ANC today. And I want to say again and again, it is Ramaphosa's ANC.
Very interesting points that you're saying there. Everyone's getting sick of the old South Africa, especially bringing out the public enterprises. Yeah, so we saw that Roger Jardine is now running for his new political party, which will be taking part in the 2024 elections. And they also want to now change corruption and fight corruption and really restructure all the SMEs. And what do you think of that?
So Roger Jardine, I see, has been pushed, so to speak, by the establishment media as a candidate to unite the opposition against, I suppose, against the EFF and against, to an extent, the ANC. So I think there's two ways of looking at this. I don't know Roger Jardine. I hear that he's got some struggle history. I don't really know what it is. I understand that his dad may have been in the struggle. I'm not sure about Roger himself. What I do know about Roger Jardine is what I've read in the media and what I've seen by association. So what I've read in the media is that he was the CEO of Aveng Construction, and they were one of the big construction companies that were fined billions by the government for colluding during the 2010 World Cup. So that collusion led to South African government losing several billion rands, for the construction of the stadiums. And to this day, those CEOs of those construction companies, including Roger Jardine, have never been criminally charged for what happened by those construction companies. So that has been quietly swept under the carpet. So what I know is Jardine was the CEO of one of those construction companies. Now, I don't know whether he was directly or not involved in the collusion and in the criminal activity of collusion, which is really, in a way, treason against the government, like the banks having manipulated the rand, which is a criminal offense. In any other country, the bank CEOs or executives would be held responsible and could face prison terms. In South Africa, there's such a close relationship between the bank CEOs and the government of the day and the Reserve Bank that they are shielded from this kind of accountability. And thank heavens for the bravery of the Competitions Commission that was able to hold these banks to account. But let's get back to Roger Jardine. Roger Jardine, I know from the media, he was involved in Kagiso. Kagiso is funded by Johann Rupert. And, there's that first association with Johann Rupert. Secondly, he was involved, I think, in Prime Media at some point, the radio stations. And essentially, Prime Media was a radio station for catering to a white audience and was, I would call it, right of center in terms of the politics of this country. And certainly not pro-black, but very much anti-black and very pro-white in terms of the radio station. But I think the third association of Roger Jardine is more interesting for me. He was, until recently, the chairman of First National Bank. Now, if you know anything about the ownership of First National Bank, you would know that it was instrumental in being started and influenced by the Rupert family and the Afrikaners. And the Rupert family still wields significant control and influence over FNB and, of course, some of the other banks in the country. But you cannot become chairman of FNB without the tacit approval of someone like Johann Rupert. There are the corridors out there. So for you to become chairman of a bank in this country, you must have the stamp of approval of Johann Rupert if it's FNB. So for me, that is quite critical because it means he has a very close association with Johann Rupert and certainly with that business community, the Afrikaner business community, essentially the old broederbond that controls the banking system even today. So when I look at this aspect of Roger Jardine, and then I read in the media that he'll have a war chest of R1 billion, we know what black people in this country don't have that kind of money. So when you talk about R1 billion, it must be coming from the likes of Johann Rupert and others that have said, okay, We will make you our candidate. Now, why has Roger Jardine come into the picture? It's very straightforward. The ANC of Ramaphosa is a dismal failure. And in every possible way, it's a dismal failure. Ramaphosa and his family have become incredibly wealthy, while South Africans have become poorer, unable to afford anything. Heavy unemployment, in fact, the highest unemployment at just under 35% in the world. No other country in the world comes anywhere near South Africa in terms of unemployment, which means that almost 1 in every 3 people in this country is unemployed right now, which is incredibly sad. And that is directly as a result of the Ramaphosa administration. Capital, which is Rupert and the banks, and the Broederbond that continues to control these institutions today, they've realized that black people are not stupid in this country. Ramaphosa's days are numbered. The ANC under Ramaphosa's days are numbered. Unless Ramaphosa steals the election, which is a possibility. Unless he rigs the election, it's a possibility. Therefore, there's a real prospect that the EFF will emerge as a very serious, credible party that will become the second biggest party in the country. It will not become the biggest party in the next election. But when the EFF becomes the second biggest party in this election, with its left of center policies, the 2029 election will see the EFF becoming the governing party, unquestionably, if the ANC remains in power. And so capital and big business and the likes of Roger Jardine and Johann Rupert and others are not interested so much in Ramaphosa not governing in 2024. Of course, they would love him to continue to govern. They want to make sure that in 2029, the EFF does not become the governing party in the country. And so this is what we call the third way strategy, which is often used in South America, Southeast Asia, when you introduce a third party candidate backed by the capital and establishment, and you throw billions behind such a candidate in order to make sure that your chosen candidate, even though he has messed up and costs so much, you have a fallback position. So Roger Jardine is frankly just a proxy for the establishment capital, and in particular Johann Rupert and the bankers and others. They are, he is their sort of side chick, so to speak, into the politics of the country. I would say to this country, be very careful of these Trojan horses that are put in front of us to fool us. Roger Jardine is a bankster. He was chairman of FNB that took away from poor people their houses, charged them high interest rates, never gave black people the money to be able to survive during COVID. FNB was one of the worst banks during COVID, despite government giving them guarantees of 200 billion in total for the banks. FNB did not, in fact, save black people's businesses and black professionals. They saved white people's businesses only with that money. So Roger Jardine must not come and pretend to have a struggle credentials to be interested in the future of all South Africans, black and white, especially the poor, the working class, the middle class of this country. He's simply a representative of capital, and in particular, a representative of Rupert and others and the Afrikaner Broederbond. If we're going to have real liberation in this country, we need new political parties that are social democratic, like the Scandinavian social democratic parties, with a large contingent of young people. Frankly speaking, having struggle credentials means nothing, because every day in the ANC there are people with struggle credentials, and look what they've done. They've messed up this country. Ramaphosa, as an example, for whatever reason, has got millions of dollars of money stashed under a mattress, and one would argue he's got struggle credentials. So that means nothing. What this country really needs is those that are going to hold banksters, capital, the establishment accountable for the development needs of his country. And someone like Roger Jardine, quite frankly, doesn't meet that standard. And all black South Africans must oppose this attempt to impose someone like Jardine on us, by people like Rupert and others. Your associations speak more for you than anything that you say. And frankly speaking, since 1994, Roger Jardine's association has been with the Ruperts and with Afrikaner capital and with those that are inherently hostile to the interest of all South Africans and to the development of South Africans. Frankly, we do need a change. Roger Jardine's party is right. But we need a change from the likes of Ramaphosa, Jardine, and Rupert and others. We need a real change of South Africans rising up against this oligopoly of the Ruperts, of the Oppenheimers, of people like Jardine, of these banksters, these banks and capital, to bring about real and true democracy and development and social justice, and so we can achieve what Mandela and people like him that sacrificed and were real struggle veterans, there were people that had real struggle credentials, wanted for our beautiful country. So Roger Jardine, I will say to people, don't fall for this con artist trick of trying to make you believe that he's any different to Ramaphosa, who we know is a proxy for the Afrikaners and for the Oppenheimers. Jardine is just simply a continuation of their proxiness, if you like, so to speak. I hope that's given you some clarity.
Yes, that's been very insightful. Thank you so much. You really exposed to us the whole establishment that's still using Jardine as their next proxy. Hopefully South Africa can go towards a social democracy in the future. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Survé.